Chapter 24. Father Feodorit. The moment arrived when I finally managed to pay a visit to Father Feodorit, back in the taiga, in response to my question as to whether there were any people in our world with knowledge and abilities similar to hers, only living closer to home. Anastasia had replied, "There are people in various corners of the earth whose lifestyle is not caught up in the prevailing technocracy. They all have different abilities. But in your world, there is also one person whom you will find it easy to approach, whether it be winter or summer. The power of his spirit is very great. Do you know where he lives? Can I see him and talk with him?" "Yes, you can." "Who is he?" "He is your father, Vladimir." "What do you mean? Anastasia, I so much wanted to hear proof that you're right about everything, and here it's all coming out the wrong way. My father died 18 years ago and was buried in a little town in the Bryansk region." Anastasia sat on the grass, her back leaning against a tree, her knees drawn up close to her chest, and silently looked at me in the eye. She seemed a little sad, as though she were taking pity on me. Then she lowered her head to her knees. I thought she might be feeling upset over her mistake regarding my father, and I tried to comfort her. "Don't get too upset, Anastasia. It's probably because, as you said yourself, you don't have that much strength left." Footnote, this conversation took place after she lost consciousness in saving the man and the woman from being murdered. I described this situation in my first book. Anastasia didn't speak for a while, then raised her head and, once more looking me right in the eye, said, "My strength has indeed lessened, but not to the point where I could be mistaken." She then proceeded to relate events that had taken place 26 years ago. She recounted the past not only with great accuracy and in minute detail, but was even able to convey nuances of inner feelings. It is understandable how one can pick up clues from the outward appearance, a barely noticeable facial expression, a body position, even the eyes, can all give clues as to what an interlocutor is thinking. But how she was able to discern the past as though it were simply a documentary newsreel is still a mystery to me. Anastasia herself was not able to explain this phenomenon in a standard, comprehensible manner, but this is what she had to say. "Not far from the Moscow is the Trinity Sergiev Monastery complex in the town of Sergiev Posad. Behind Trinity Sergiev's massive ancient walls, there is a seminary, an academy, and several cathedrals, in addition to the monastery proper. The cathedrals are open to the public, and anyone who wishes can come and pray in this holy place of Rus." Footnote, Rus, the name of the old Russian territory, which by the 19th century AD was centered around Kiev. From Rus came the Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus we know today. It was not destroyed even during the campaigns of persecution against believers. Indeed, right through this period, the institutions behind the walls continued to function uninterrupted, providing a place where the monastic brethren could serve God. 26 years ago, on the very day I came into this world, she continued, a young man in his late teens walked through the gates of the Trinity Sergiev Monastery. He toured the museum, then proceeded to visit the main cathedral, where a sermon was being read by a tall, gray-haired monk. Both the monk's height and his rank were well above average. This was Father Feodorit, Archimandrite of the Trinity Sergiev Monastery. The young man listened to his sermon. Later, when Father Feodorit withdrew, he followed him into one of the treasury rooms, unhindered by the temple staff. Going up to Father Feodorit, he started talking to him about the sermon. and Father Feodoret spoke with him for a long time. The young man had been baptized, but did not have much inner faith. He did not observe the fasts, did not take communion, and did not attend church regularly. But that day marked the beginning of a friendship between Father Feodoret and the young man. The young man started paying visits to the monastery. Father Feodoret would talk with him and show him the sanctuaries normally off limits to ordinary parishioners. The monk gave him books, which he lost. The monk placed a little cross on a chain around his neck, and it was lost as well. The monk gave him a second cross, a most unusual one. It opened like a tiny case, but it too was lost. The monk would even take the young man into the refectory and seat him at the same table as the monks. Each time he would give him a little money. He never rebuked him for anything, and always looked forward to his arrival. This went on for a whole year. The young man visited the monastery every week, but one day he left and did not return the following week. He did not come after a month, even a whole year. The monk still waited. Now 25 years have passed already. The monk is still waiting. 25 years, Vladimir. Your spiritual father has been waiting for you, that great Russian monk, Father Feodoret. I went far away from the monastery, to Siberia. I sometimes thought of Father Feodoret, I responded, as though justifying my actions to myself or to somebody else. But you did not write even one letter, observed Anastasia. I want to see him. And what will you tell him? Perhaps about how you made money, were happy in love, and simply went astray? How many times you were at death's door, but at the last moment you were delivered from your woes? He will see all of that for himself, just by looking at you. He prayed for forgiveness of your sins time after time, and time after time saved you through his prayers. He still believes, just as he did 25 years ago. He was hoping for something different from you. What was it, Anastasia? What does Father Feodoret know? What does he want? I cannot comprehend it, at least not now. It was something he felt intuitively. Tell me, Vladimir, do you remember the conversations you had with him? Do you remember what you saw in the monastery treasury room? It's all very fuzzy in my mind. After all, it was so long ago. I can only remember isolated scenes. Try to remember them. I shall help you. Father Feodoret would walk with me each time in various places in the monastery. I remember some underground rooms. At least they were partially underground. I remember the refectory, the long table where the monks took their supper, and I had supper with them. It was during a time of some sort of fast. The food was especially prepared for the fast, but I liked it. Do you have any unusual impressions or feelings during your visits to the monastery? Once after supper, I left the refectory and went through a passageway to an inner courtyard of the monastery complex, heading for an exit. The gate was already closed to parishioners. The courtyard was empty. Those massive high walls blocked out the noise from the city beyond. All I could see around me were cathedrals. Everything was completely silent. I stopped. It seemed as though I could hear solemn music playing. I needed to leave. There was a monk on duty at the gate to let me out and bolt the gate shut after me. But I just stood there and listened to that music, and eventually, slowly, made my way over to the gate. You never heard that music again? You never experienced the same impression? No. Did you ever try to hear that music, to call up the impression of it from within? Yes, but I never managed to, even as I even tried standing on that same spot the next time I came, but alas. Try thinking of something else, Vladimir. Now you're interrogating me. You recounted everything so accurately, everything that happened to me 26 years ago. You tell me how I felt back then." "That is not possible. Father Feodoret did not formulate any specific plans. He was hoping for something intuitively. But he did do something great and significant for you, something known only to him. I can only feel it intuitively myself. He thought up something significant and did a lot towards this end, a great deal, in fact. But why he associated his desire with you who did not have the basic abilities to come quickly into the faith, remains a mystery, and why he has not broken this faith even after 25 years of your profligate life, that too is a mystery. And why are you, who have received so much, still sitting on your hands? Why? I cannot understand that. After all, nothing in the universe ever disappears without a trace. Please see if you can remember even isolated scenes from your meetings and conversations with your spiritual father. I remember a salon, or perhaps it was some sort of treasury room, in the academy or seminary, or maybe it was one of the underground rooms in the monastery itself. Some kind of monk opened the door for Father Feodoret, but didn't go in himself. The father and I went in alone. There were some pictures on the walls and things standing on little shelves. You experienced 2 surprises there. What were they? Surprises? Yes, of course, it did surprise me. Astounded me. What did? A particular picture. It was black and white, as if drawn with a pencil. It was a meticulously executed portrait of some person. So, what surprised you about it? I don't remember. Think, Vladimir. Please try to recall it. I shall help you. There was the small salon. You were standing alone there with Father Feodoret in front of this picture. You were standing just a little way in front of him, and he told you, "Step a little closer to the picture, Vladimir." You took 1 step forward, and then another. I remember. Anastasia. What? This picture of a person was drawn with a single line, a fluctuating spiral line. It was as though the artist had put up his pencil or whatever in the middle of a blank sheet of paper, and without taking it off the paper, had made it go in a spiral, alternately pressing hard on it to make the line thicker and ease up, barely touching the paper to make a fine, delicate line, but still continuous. The spiral line ended at one edge of the page. The result was an amazing picture, the portrait of a person. This picture, Anastasia advised, should be put on public display for all to see. Someone will be able to decipher the information concealed within it. That pulsating line portraying a person has something to say to people. How? I do not know yet. You are aware, for example, how dots and dashes can represent an alphabet or musical notation. I can only guess. It could be one or the other of those, or something else besides. When you return, ask them to put it on public display, or to publish it somewhere. Someone will turn up who is able to decipher that spiral line. But who will listen to me? They will listen to you. But back then you experienced a second most unusual feeling. Can you recall what it was? It was in the same room, or in the next room. Yes, it was a rather small room where a beautiful carved wooden chair was standing on a raised platform. Perhaps it was an armchair or something like a throne. Father Feodoret and I stood and looked at it. The father said that nobody ever touched it. But you touched it, and even sat on it. It was Father Feodoret himself who suggested I sit on it. And what happened to you when you did? Nothing. I sat there looking at Father Feodoret, and he stood there silently looking me in the eye. Just looked, that's all. Please remember, Vladimir, try to recall your inner feelings. They are most important. Well, there was nothing special. It was just that, some thoughts began running through my head, lickety-split, like an audio tape. in fast-forward mode, and the words all blurred together into a stream of unintelligible sounds. And you never tried deciphering them, Vladimir? Did you ever have the desire to stop that tape so that you could listen to it at normal speed and understand what it was saying? How could I? By pondering the essence of your being. No, never tried that. You're not making any sense. And the things that Father Feodoret told you, did you understand everything? Can you recall precisely even a single phrase? Even a phrase without any connection to the rest? Yes, but I really can't remember what it was connected with. Tell me what it was. You will show them. At this point, Anastasia, who had been sitting under the tree, suddenly sprang up, her face beaming. She put her hands on the trunk of the cedar and pressed her cheek against it. Yes, of course, she exclaimed, waving her arms with joy and delightedly crying out. You are truly great, monk of Russia. You know, Vladimir, there is one thing I can tell you for certain about Father Feodoret. He has made a mockery of all of the world's teachings by showing what is the most essential thing. He and I never discussed any teachings. We talked about everyday things. Yes, of course. Everyday things. Father Feodoret spoke about things that you were interested in. He showed you sacred creations and treated them with veneration, but avoided making a big show of it. Even though he had risen to a high rank, he was a very simple man, and most importantly, a thinking man. Perhaps he was even meditating during the time that you were with him, and he was not one to expound dogmas. How silly the preachers of the conventional dogmas that flocked to Russia from abroad look by comparison with him. They only distract one's attention from the most essential thing. He was so successful at protecting you from dogmas that you see me too as a naive recluse. It does not matter who I am. What matters is that you stick to the most essential thing. What most essential thing? The thing that is in every man. But how can every man know the teachings of the gurus of the West and the East, India and Tibet, if he has never even heard of them? All essential information has been included in man, Vladimir, in every man right from the start. It is something he is given on the day of his creation, just like arms, legs, hair, and a heart. All the teachings of the world, along with all discoveries, are taken exclusively from this source. Just as parents try to give their child everything, so the Grand Creator gives everything to each one, right off. Nothing man-made, not a multitude of books, nor the latest computers and the computers of the future, all taken together, can ever encompass even a part of the information contained in a single man. One has only to know how to use it.
I'm gonna taste this dirt. Oh, they say you can eat dirt.
I wouldn't eat that dirt, Leaf. There's too many cats around. There might be parasites in it.
Well, cats don't step on garden.
Yeah, they do.
No,
I'm saying don't eat that dirt, okay? I don't trust it.
but I can eat.
I'm trying to
the
read.
dirt.
Please don't argue.
But can I eat the garden dirt?
I don't know. I don't think so. That's how we got parasites one time. So, no.
Well, women say you can do that.
I know, but that doesn't mean you should do it. The earth is no longer pure, unfortunately. They're raining toxins down every day. Okay, back to reading. Then why doesn't everybody make discoveries? And why doesn't everyone formulate teachings? Let us say one person manages to extract a grain of truth from the whole, and he keeps talking about it enthusiastically, thinking it was given to him alone. And that contains the most essential thing. He talks it up to others, trying to make them see it as the one and only important thing. But by talking like this, he is blocking the basic complex But by talking like this, he is blocking the basic complex network of information already existing within himself. Knowledge of the truth consists not in proclaiming it, but in living it. And what way of living it is characteristic of those who best know the truth. A happy one. I think that was meant to say, and what way of living is it characteristic of those who best know the truth? I think that's what it should have said, but the book got it mixed up. Or maybe my brain did, I don't know. Anyway, Anastasia replies, a happy one. But to know the truth, one must have a conscious awareness and purity of thought. That is visionary. Fantastic, Anastasia shrieked with laughter and merrily added, you read my thoughts? Nothing visionary there. It is simply an attentive attitude to man. You're always relating everything to purity of thought and conscious awareness. Visionary, visionary, she repeated, still laughing. You read my thoughts. Oh, how fantastic. Upon hearing her cheery laughter, I too could no longer restrain myself and broke into peals of merriment. Later, I asked, what do you think, Anastasia? Will my spiritual father, Father Feodorit, receive me if I go see him? Will he talk with me? He won't be upset? Of course he will receive you. He will be most happy to see you there. He will accept you any way you are. Only he will be even happier to see you if you have done at least something useful, something using the information within you, if he perceives some indication that you are aware of it. Stop the fast forward, Vladimir, and you shall understand a great deal. Does my spiritual father still live in the same place, at the Trinity Sergeev Monastery? Your spiritual father, that great elder of Rus, is now living in a small monastic priory in the forest, not far from the Trinity Sergeev Monastery. The priory's regulations are stricter than those in the monastery, and your spiritual father is the prior there. The priory is situated in the forest in a compellingly beautiful setting. There are just a few little houses there, each with its own monastic cell. This priory, situated in the green forest, has a small wooden church. It is not ornately decorated, and it does not have a gilded dome, but it is very, very beautiful, cozy and clean, heated by 2 stoves. Candles are not bought or sold there, as are in most churches. In fact, nothing is bought or sold there. There is nothing and nobody to desecrate it, and parishioners are not allowed access. Even to this day, your spiritual father, Father Feodorit, is praying in this church. He is praying for the salvation of everybody's soul, including yours. He is praying for children who have forgotten their parents, and praying for the parents forgotten by their children. Go to him and bow before him. Ask for forgiveness of your sins. The power of his spirit is very great. And give my deepest respects to Father Feodorit. Fine, Anastasia. I shall do that. And you know, I shall first try and do what you have asked me to. Upon arriving at Sergeev Posad, the town outside Moscow, which used to be called Zagorsk, I entered the gates of the Trinity Sergeev Monastery, just as I had used to do 27 years ago. I first headed for the gate to the active part of the monastery. Before, all I had to do was introduce myself and ask for Father Feodorit. But this time the monk on duty replied that the archpriest was no longer Father Feodorit. There was a Father Feodorit at the monastery, living in the forest outside the monastery grounds, but parishioners did not go there. I told the monk that I was an acquaintance of Father Feodorit's, and in proof of this I named the monastery sanctuaries which the Father had shown me so many years ago. Then I was told where the forest priory was situated, and with with an inexplicable shiver of excitement, I approached the little wooden church in the forest. It was indeed extraordinarily beautiful and blended in harmoniously with the natural environment. There were paths leading to the church from several little wooden cell houses situated around it. Father Feodoret met with me on the small wooden porch of the forest church. I was a bit at loss for words. I remembered Anastasia's counsel. Only do not be embarrassed and try not to act surprised when you meet your spiritual father. Still, I couldn't get over an inexplicable feeling of trepidation. Father Feodoret was old and gray, but no older than he had appeared 27 years ago. We sat on some blocks of wood on the porch of the little forest church without a word between us. I tried to speak, but couldn't manage to come up with the right thing to say. It seemed as though he already knew the whole picture, and there was no sense in uttering words. It was as if the 27 years since we had last met had not gone by at all. It seemed as though we had parted only yesterday. I had brought along a copy of my book on Anastasia to give to Father Feodoret, but I felt reluctant to actually hand it to him. I had been showing the book to various clerics. Some just took one look at it and said they didn't read books like that. Others asked what it was about, and after my brief explanation, pronounced Anastasia as an infidel. An infidel, not as an. I didn't feel like upsetting Father Feodoret, and certainly didn't want him to reject her out of hand. Each time someone had tried to speak ill of Anastasia, a feeling of resistance had welled up in me. I even had a row about it with a deacon of the Novice Pasky Monastery. Footnote, claimed to be the oldest monastery in Moscow, dating back to the founding of Moscow in 1147 by Prince Yuri Dologyuriki. Once again, forgive all my super cringy pronunciations. Oh well. He pointed out two women wearing dark clothing and black-haired scarves and said, "That is how God-fearing women should be." I responded, "If Anastasia is happy and enjoying life, that may well be pleasing to God. It is more pleasant to see people enjoying life than being all dull and downcast like that." So it was with some trepidation that I finally got out my book and handed it to Father Feodoret. He took it quietly and held it in the palm of one hand. He began gently stroking it with his other hand, as though feeling something with his palms, and asked, "Do you want me to read it?" And without waiting for an answer, added, "Fine, leave it with me." 2 days later, I paid a morning visit to Father Feodoret. We sat there in the forest on a tiny bench near the father's cell, and we talked about all sorts of things. While his manner of speaking was pretty much the same as 27 years ago, one thing bothered me. Why did Father Feodoret look just a bit younger than 27 years ago? And all at once he broke off his train of thought and said, "You know, Vladimir, your Father Feodoret has passed on." At first I was speechless. Then I managed to ask, "Then who are you?" "I am Father Feodoret," he replied, looking at me with just a faint trace of a smile. Then I asked him, "Tell me, where is his grave?" "In the old cemetery." "I'd like to see it. Can you tell me how to get there?" He didn't say anything about the grave, only, "Come and see me again whenever you have the time." And then an incredible experience began taking place. "Time for dinner," said Father Feodoret. "Come, I'll give you something to eat." In a small hut which served as a refectory, I sat down to table. The table was set out with a tureen of borscht, mashed potatoes, fish, and a drink with stewed fruit. He poured some borscht into a bowl for me, and I began eating. The father himself did not eat. He simply sat at the table. As soon as I started in on the potatoes, I felt a delightful taste in my mouth. It brought back memories. The potatoes tasted exactly as they had done in the monastery refectory 27 years ago. I had remembered it all my life since then. My head began spinning. On the one hand, here was a different Father Feodoret, sitting beside me. On the other hand, he talked and behaved exactly as I remembered from before. I recalled how one time, many years ago, when we were together in one of the rooms of the monastery, Father Feodoret had suggested I have my picture taken with him. I agreed. He called over one of the monks who had a camera, and he took our picture. Now I decided to use this to introduce some clarity to my present situation. I knew that monks did not like to pose for pictures, and the thought came to me to ask Father Feodoret if he would mind if I had a color picture taken of us, and that I also wanted to take one of the little forest church. If he refused, that would mean he was not the same Father Feodoret, not my Father Feodoret. And so I suggested, "Let me have my picture taken with you." Father Feodoret did not refuse, and we had our picture taken. And I also took a snapshot of the little church. It turned out rather well, even though I had a very simple camera. As I was leaving, Father Feodoret gave me a small travel Bible. It was not laid out in verses, like all the other Bibles I had seen, but simply in running text, as in an ordinary book. He advised me, "When you cite the Bible in your book, you should indicate the precise chapter you are quoting from." Footnote: the Russian edition of Anastasia includes no chapter and verse references. Those in the English edition of Book 1 were added by the translator and editor. I asked him whether he would be open to receiving and talking with people who wished to meet with Anastasia, so they wouldn't have to travel such a long distance to the Siberian taiga. To which he replied, I still haven't fully understood myself. So for now, just come alone, whenever you have the time." I was disappointed by Father Feodoret's refusal to see other people, but I wasn't about to press the matter. My conversation with him on a variety of subjects led me to the following conclusion. In Russian monasteries, there are to be found certain elders whose wisdom and simplicity of expression far surpasses the art of countless numbers of denominational preachers, either of the homegrown or imported variety. But why are you silent, you elders of Russia, that have been endowed with such wisdom? Is there something to which you have been led on your own? Or are there dark forces of some kind that are preventing you from speaking out? People come to a church service, and it turns out to be in a language they don't understand. Footnote: Russian Orthodox services are conducted in Old Church Slavonic, which is an ancient distant relative of Russian, but barely comprehensible to today's Russian speakers. And then people flock in droves and even pay money to hear preachers talk in a language they can understand. Maybe this is why so many Russians flock to foreign holy places and ignore their own. I always felt a sense of peace in my heart after speaking with Father Feodoret. The way he talks is a lot simpler, clearer, and more understandable than the vast majority of the preachers I went to hear after meeting with Anastasia in my efforts to make some sense of what she had said. I want others to have a good experience too. But when will you speak out, wise elders of Russia?